Why, hello. Today we're going to be discussing how to write like an amateur. I'm going to discuss three methods and two principles of writing that'll improve all of your short stories as well as novels. Let's begin with the three lenses that I highly recommend you do to all your stories today. The first one is make sure your characters are alive, living characters. What does that mean? That means your characters should have a personality. You should be able to anticipate their next words, reactions, or actions in any story. And at some point, once you've built your characters enough, they should tell themselves. They should be pushing the story and not your story trying to push your characters. So characters tell the story don't tell the characters. How do you know if you have that? Well, when you read your story, look at your characters, their descriptions, their attitude, their body language, their dialogue. Is it consistent? Is it developed? Do you have a background in mind? And if you don't, your characters probably come off a little flat and generic and thus not relatable. So make sure your characters are living. The other lens you should be looking at your writing with is to make sure that you have living text. What does that mean? It means that the text in between dialogue and actions is also just as alive, three-dimensional, tangible, textured as your characters are. So if you have your character acting frantically, then your text should kind of convey that same emotion. You should have the detail of, you know, people with screaming due to fire or creaking sound of a building collapsing, like whatever it is, if they're feeling tension or suspense or whatever emotion is, the text should really correlate to that to kind of make it one, plausible that your character feels that way, and two, get your reader to be able to relate. Or if your character's a bit quirky and off, then the contrast is what matters. So a completely serene scenario, but this person's an irritable person and quick to snap or jump at things, and that should be made clear too. So make sure your text is alive and emanating the same emotion that your character is. Like if they're seeing a beautiful sunrise and your character's like in awe, then the text describing that sunrise should make me, the reader, in awe. I want to be able to relate and connect and have the experience that the characters are. This is all about immersion. So, three-dimensional dynamic characters, three-dimensional dynamic text. The next thing you want to do in your writing is to make sure that you have microcosms. So what this is after you've went through your text to make sure your characters are alive and your text is alive, you might want to start looking at the story as a whole. And what I mean by microcosm is that in a story, you have your main story arc that you wish to accomplish, like on the novel level. But within that novel level, within the chapter, within the paragraph, within a few sentences, there should be many stories, each with their rising action, their climax, and their falling action. So, true storyline, in my opinion, will not just have the whole bell curve, but the bell curve itself will be comprised of many bell curves. So, how does this look? Well, Harry Potter is destined to kind of fight Voldemort and defeat him and save the wizarding world. But in between that, he has a lot of small stories. And I'm not just talking about like Cerberus, the three-headed dog, or any of the major events or defeating the snake in Chamber of Secrets. I also mean just the little events. Like, for example, he's supposed to go to Hogwarts very early in book one, and they say, "Hey, you have to take this train. You have to go to platform 9 3/4." He tries to go there, rams into the wall, looks like a fool, and eventually has to find a new way. So here's the problem: I need to get to Hogwarts. And along that, we have this rising action of like he meets these wizards and they tell him all this cool stuff, and we're all amped up for him to go to Hogwarts, and he can't go. So this is kind of like the problem. This is the rising action. And the climax of this is he finds a new way. He goes Diagon Alley or diagonally. Love J.K. Rowling's puns. She has tons in the book. Um, and then we finally get to Hogwarts. That's the completion of a whole story. You have your climax, your rising action, and your falling action, and then we're on to another little story. Um, so make sure to have uh, mini stories inside your larger story. One key component of a story of any story is to have some sort of conflict, and conflict basically is just an issue they have to overcome, and you can do this a lot of different ways. One ways I think conflicts are detailed or emerged is through changing expectations. So you expect one thing to happen, something different happens. I think this is super important in developing conflict and keeping the story engaging is just changing expectations. So set up one thing, do another. Don't always do that, write your story as it is, but it is important to not just say, hey, we're going to do this. Then we do this. Kind of boring. And you want to do this both on the small level with just, individual events as well as the grand level. So we've talked about living characters, living text, the importance of having microcosms in your text. Um, Here's the last principle here is you want to have something that I call payoff to read ratio. And that is during all of this rising and falling action is you want to leave breadcrumbs for your reader to want to keep reading. Nobody likes a 10-hour joke, even if the punchline is hilarious. So make sure either they find a character relatable or funny, cute scenes or something needs to be enjoyable and luring them in. You don't just want the hook at the beginning. Yes, the hook is the first kind of, yes, please read my first page. But after that, you need multiple hooks. It's not just one and done. Um, and the goal eventually is that the characters themselves are the hook and they just are constantly in love with every page they read. But make sure you have either engaging moments or engaging characters as you go. Ways to help improve this is be concise. So having concise text improves your payoff to read ratio. So they have to read less before they get more value. Another way on the larger scale is, do I even need this? Is this scene cuttable? Do I have to explain all of the context and background in order to achieve my goal? And if you don't, more often than not, it's better to just go straight to where you're going. I was writing a story about a leprechaun whose dream was to go to the end of a rainbow. And in my story, I was going to have him reach the end of a rainbow, and there's going to be a giant like portal, and they're all going to go through it, and then there's going to be a great party with the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and all the other leprechauns, and it was going to be like this crazy, like wacky event. And then I said, why do I need the portal? Why do I need to have a second location and describe that all? Why not just have the event at the end of the rainbow? That just seems to make more sense, and it cut out a little transitionary step. Um, so look for that, and it shortened my short story by a few paragraphs. Really important. So those are a few important tips. Is make sure you have good value, good payoff to read ratio. Make sure stuff interesting stuff happens, and you can do that through having good little microcosms, through having changing expectations. You can also make value happen by having living characters and living text. And the last thing I want you to do is, after you write your stories, is you want to go through and read with all these different principles in mind. Read with characters in mind. Read with text in mind. Read with payoff to read ratio in mind. Read with brevity in mind. um, Go through. And one really good way to do this is to read your stories aloud. This can really help you see if sentencing structure is choppy or awkward. And from my experience, and I'm no like professional, I've written 60 plus short stories over the past year. And I really have enjoyed this process. And these are things I'm learning and I'm passing on to you as beginner writers, and hopefully it'll improve your work. So read your stories aloud. And my final thought is your final read should be done with your character's feeling and attitude infused in every word. To me, characters tell stories, and that should be the guiding line in your novel or short story. Stay tuned next time for more tips and also stories that I will read of mine to share with all of you.